Aloha. Welcome to Finding Your Piece of the Rock on ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm your host, Abe Lee. I've been a licensed real estate agent since 1973. I'm the owner of Century 21 iProperties Hawaii and work with over 100 wonderful agents in real estate sales. I started Abe Lee seminars in 1980. I have taught over 10,000 students, helping them get their real estate license, and teach continuing education classes for licensees to renew their license every 2 years. Our show is dedicated to helping buyers and sellers understand the process involved in a real estate transaction. Our special guests will talk about legal issues, escrow, title, getting a loan, surveys, home inspections, insurance, contracts, wills and trusts, and much, much more. Our special guest today is Allison Lum, one of the best real estate agents in Hawaii. We'll be right back. Allison, thank you so much for being here, especially with your busy schedule. I really appreciate you being on our show today.
Thank you.
Okay, Allison, before we start asking questions about the real estate process, which you are an expert at, give us a little background on your education, where you grew up, and your job history, and what made you get into real estate.
Okay, thank you so much for having me, Abe. I started real estate in 1988. And then I graduated from Punahou, went to UW for my undergrad and BC for my MBA. I teach with Abe continuing education on RPR software and foreclosures. And I started in real estate mostly because my mom was in real estate. Thank you.
Okay, so tell us what kind of, are you doing mostly sales, property management, or a little bit of both?
Yeah, definitely sales.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so now let's go through the process, because really the intent of this show is to have your expertise in helping the viewers understand what they need to go through to become a home buyer, right? So can you walk us through the home buying process? And let's start from the beginning. You meet somebody, and then whether it be a stranger or someone that you know or someone that you got introduced to, now what are you going to do with them in the home buying process? What's the first few things that you're going to go through?
Okay, so this is how I do my buyers, and I walk them through the process. It's a point of view, but it's also with my fiduciary duty to the buyer in mind. So it's more buyer oriented than seller oriented. So the first step, any buyer, I would say, you have to talk to the lender. Lender is going to take your income information, run your credit. They're going to tweak the numbers to see what you can afford. The hardest thing for Honolulu or Hawaii buyers is coming up with the 20% down. If you have less than 20% down, then you'll have other little quirky things like mortgage insurance. You always want to shoot for 20% down, because then you have a comfort level. The bank has a comfort level that the loan is going to be successful. So your lender is going to figure out what the most you can afford by factoring your income, your loan payment, your real property taxes, your maintenance fees, and insurance. So that's how we start. And then once you know how much you can afford, then you would go about, how do you go about looking for a home? Do you have any other questions on that lender part?
On the lender, how do you pick lenders? I mean, do you have a stable of lenders that you use for specific types of loans?
Yeah, thank you. So a lot of people have their own lender from a relationship, family relationship, or a friend type thing. If they want to get a recommendation, we usually give about 3 recommendations of lenders that we like to work with. So they have a proven track record, and you know that they also have fiduciary duty to the buyer. Thank you.
Okay, that's one. So then someone says, I want to see everything from Hawaii Kai to Waianae. how do you narrow down the search? Because it's like looking for a needle in a haystack.
It is. And so this is where it's really important to have a realtor because they can put it into the computer and put it in the multiple listing service as a prospect. So most of the time, the most criteria is going to be the purchase price. And so if you're going to, like Hawaii Kai purchase price average $1 million, Waianae purchase price average 300,000, vastly different. So then you're going to know immediately what's going to be feasible for you to buy and what's not going to be feasible for you to buy. So further than that, the realtor can put a prospecting function in there with a whole slew of features. So for condos, the most often is price, the bedrooms, bathrooms, washer dryer inside, uncovered, covered parking, and pets. Lanai is the most common. For houses, it's going to be a lot of times they want flat land. They don't care for the steep land that's up against the mountain with the rocks coming down. And they want to know the land square footage and the age of the home. All of those features can be factored into the multiple listing service. And so when a listing comes up, it's going to alert you, the buyer, and your realtor that this listing fits your priorities perfectly. Further than that, the other important is fee simple versus leasehold. Vastly different types of ownership. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Now, the appointments, do you let them go to open houses, brokers open, or do you go with them to the brokers open or open houses? Or do you send them on their own if you're busy? How do you handle that? Because you must be busy and you can't go with everybody to all the homes.
Yeah, so that is both. It really depends on how fast the market is. So if the property is priced right and they're going to have their first showing at an open house, you're going to take your buyer there and see if it fits everything because likely they're going to have multiple offers. Right now, the market is a little bit soft, but only certain areas. Other areas are super fast. They're getting multiple offers. You need to be on top of it. You need to have your pre-approval letter from your lender, and you need to be talking the best price. In a slower market, you can, come and make things longer. You can, okay, let's watch that one, see if another one comes up. This again is different between house and condo purchase. Condos, a lot of condo units are the same, so you don't need to be as stringent. Neighborhoods, a little bit more different. There's Wailai Nui Ridge. Very difficult to find a listing in Wailai Nui Ridge type of thing because it hardly ever comes on the market. I think we're tracking one listing in 5 years. It's just so difficult to find.
Wow. Okay. So do you see the market slowing down or is it still pretty hot depending on the area, the desirability of the neighborhood?
Yeah, definitely. It's not slowing down. We have multiple offers. Hawaii Kai recently, 11 offers. I mean, it's, you find that out from the realtor, the listing agent, and you talk to your buyer, oh, maybe we don't need to compete on this property because it's going to likely go higher than market.
Okay. So when you meet with a client, do you have specific questions that you ask of them? And do you try to get a gauge of how motivated they are? Like one is, we're just starting, I'm cold, versus 10, I'm hot to trot, I should have bought last week or last year. How do you know when someone is hot to trot or they're just kind of kicking the tires right now?
We have all kinds of buyers in the market. I have one buyer that's been looking for 10 years. It's like, well, we should have bought 10 years ago and we'd be sitting pretty right now. But now, so it really depends on the buyer's motivation. And then if they are hot to trot, then we definitely put it in immediately, get that pre-approval, run the search, set up the prospect, and then we go from there.
Okay. if someone says, I don't know if I should buy a house or a condo, what's the major determination factors on whether they should stay in a condo, go to a condo or a house?
That one is going to depend on their situation. Maybe they have a dog, two kids, and it's also the main thing is going to be price again.
Mm-hmm.
So maintenance fees, that's another fee that you're going to have to pay. It's always escalating. It never really goes down. And then we also have condos that are very old. So we're going to have some situations with plumbing, sewer lines, and sprinklers.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can afford a house, much better to get a house. But a lot of people cannot afford house, then they go to condo.
Sure. Okay, now let's say let's take a condo first. Let's say condo's 500,000, right? How much initial deposit should they have? And you mentioned 20%, but let's say initial deposit, how much do they put down? Is there a set rule on how much they should put down?
Yeah, good question. It's not really a set rule because the deposit and the initial deposit are both refundable to the buyer.
Mm.
Some old-time realtors, they want to see a large deposit because then they think the buyer is more committed.
Right.
It really depends on the person.
Okay.
And what you're going to put as your best foot forward. If you're competing offers, you're going to put a large down. If you're not competing offers, you can go minimal down. But either way, it's refundable to the buyer, provided they have a contingency to cancel the contract.
Don't you find that some of the buyers are afraid that they'll lose their money and they have no idea that it's refundable based on some of the contingencies that they have, like home inspection or termite report or preliminary title report or whatever it is?
Right. So yeah, definitely. So Hawaii is a buyer state. Hawaii is a tenant state. Traditionally, we have going up. The market's constantly going up. So by the time we close, the seller could get a higher price. So we want to keep the buyer in there and keep the seller committed to us as the buyer. So we definitely try to make the buyer feel very comfortable with the purchase. So at the get-go, as soon as you have a meeting of the minds on price and terms, you're going to have contingencies. So the first contingency likely is the seller's real property disclosure statement. It's 5 pages of asking questions of the seller. Anything the buyer doesn't like, they can cancel, get their deposit back. Then there's the preliminary title report where the escrow and title is going to make sure they're giving you clear title. We don't want any clouds on title. Don't want the neighbors, saying, hey, you did something wrong and, your title is messed up because of something that happened in the title. There's a break in the title. And then there's the condominium documents. That one is a real key one. The main thing is the 5-page, it's called the RR 105C, and it's the condo disclosure. So again, it's 5 pages asking the condo association, what problems do you have with the condo? So the ones you're zeroing in on are the maintenance fees, the special assessments, any upkeep, any upcoming repairs and maintenance. And then you zero in also on the minutes to the meeting, the reserve study. There's the bylaws and the condominium declaration, but that's not as important because that just sets up the condo.
So who reviews all these documents? I mean, does the realtor do that, or do they ask a specialist to review the condo documents and the financial statements?
Yeah, good question. Usually we give it to the buyer reviews. Usually they're so inundated with paper because it's a lot of paper that I zero in pretty much RR 105C, minutes to the meeting, and financials. If they are really gun shy and they want to understand it more, we would hand it off to a lawyer, a real estate lawyer to look at. But nobody knows for sure if they have enough reserves or anything like that. So kind of a stab in the dark. You have to have a leap of faith.
Okay, now they have what they call a purchase contract, otherwise known as a PC. It's a 14-page document. How much details do you go into in explaining the various paragraphs in the contract?
So the main thing for the buyer is going to be those contingencies.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to have the disclosure statement, the condo docs, the title report. The lender's going to send out an appraiser, and then you're going to get a timely termite report. All properties in Hawaii have termites. So you want to know the degree of the termites, and you may or may not be able to cancel on if it has too much termites for your preference.
Okay. So as a real estate agent, I assume you're like the quarterback, coordinating all the different parties that need to be involved in a transaction. So how do you pick a home inspector?
Again, home inspector, a lot of times it's relationship. You feel that you met this person. I just met a really good home inspector. And, I asked him, how long have you been in it? How much are you charging? That inspection fee is a sunk cost, by the way. So you can spend anywhere from $3 onwards up for a house, to over $1,000 on the home inspection. If you cancel based on the inspection, the fee goes out the window and you can't recoup that. So, was that the question?
Yeah, well, like the home inspector. So, okay, so that's one. Okay.
Oh.
Second, how about the termite inspector? Same thing. You have a set number of companies that you look at saying, hey, I want them to do the inspection.
Yeah, so we had some issues in the 80s on home inspectors where they would choose the seller would choose the home inspector, and the seller chose a company that's different from the one that's familiar with the termite history of the house. And the termite report is such that there's a lot of hidden areas. So we changed that. We said, no, the buyer's going to choose the termite company. And then you have some companies that have their vested interest. They say, yeah, there's termites, so you got a tent. So we want to use disinterested termite companies for the inspection. And then further, if you want a tent, we can get you quotes for that. But the seller is paying that. So it's not as much of a buyer situation.
All right. So now how about the role of the appraiser? When does he come into this?
Yeah.
When does he go out to?
Appraisal tends to be after the 14 days when you're receiving condo docs, title report, everything after the inspection, because at the same time the appraiser is hired, the lender's doing their due diligence to make sure that the buyer is really qualified and verifying their income, verifying their employment, that kind of thing. So the appraiser is going to be one of the last to go out.
Okay. And that's a sunk cost too, isn't it?
Yeah, through the application fee usually.
Right. So if you don't like the house or you don't qualify, then that money's gone.
Yeah.
Okay. So now in the contract, does the seller usually pay for the termite inspection fee?
Yes.
Okay. So then the buyer pays for the home inspection and they pay for also the appraisal. If there's termite damage or infestation and the termite inspection report recommends treatment, who usually pays for that?
Seller.
Okay. So there might be two types of termites, right? The ground termite and what they call the drywood.
Right.
So it could be a different type of treatment that they're recommending.
Right. And then we have a whole slew of different treatments now. So originally we would just have the tenting for drywoods and the chemicals in the ground for the subterranean. And then now we have orange oil, we have heat, we have frozen stuff. It's like really the gamut.
Wow. Okay. Surveyor. In a house, in a condo, I'm assuming you don't need a surveyor.
Right.
But in a house, would you recommend a survey?
Oh, most definitely. So we have two clauses on the house: survey and staking. Staking is a simple one. They just make sure the pins are in order and they don't tell you about any encroachment. When seller is paying for the bill of the survey, we want to make sure that We know if the neighbor has a wall that's encroaching or a stairwell that's encroaching. And we would want to have an encroachment agreement if it's encroaching upon our property. And
Okay.
sometimes even vice versa. If we're encroaching on the other property, you basically want to make sure that the neighbors are going to be happy that you move in and then you're going to start off on a good foot. You're not going to want to have wars over this wall or this stairwell.
Okay. Now, I understand that there's a lot of encroachments like a wall or a fence, or sometimes even part of a house. And is there what we call the minimum distances that are encroaching that are not considered to be encroachments and you don't need to get an encroachment agreement?
Yeah, this is a good question. Way back when the instruments for the survey weren't as exact. So people would put their wall in and it would be encroaching a large amount. Now we have the de minimis rule, which is 6 inches. So 6 inches is acceptable. But in reality, we really want to make sure that everybody's happy.
Okay. So that's a residential property.
Yeah.
Okay. And they have different distances for other types. Okay.
Right.
Now, who picks the escrow company?
Escrow company is usually picked, well, it's picked by the buyer at the get-go through the offer. That can be countered by the seller.
Mm-hmm.
Usually seller has done some preliminary work. So they've gotten the title report. They've addressed some issues on what might be needed, perhaps a name change or a petition on land court, that kind of thing. So they've tried to make it more streamlined and ready to go. So then in that case, the seller wants to use that title company because they already started some work.
Okay. So what's the difference between escrow department and title department? People think they're all the same, but do they have different roles in a transaction?
Yes, good question. So escrow is just in charge of holding the money and making sure all of the portions of the contract have been met. Title is for the title insurance. So they're going to run the title, make sure that there's no clouds on the title. And then they're going to insure your title and say that you have good title. We are ready to close. They're going to tell escrow. So they're actually two separate, but most of our companies here are title and escrow.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And we don't have too many title companies, do we? Escrow companies?
Yeah, and they're getting bought out. So we're getting less and less.
Okay. All right. Very good. So how do you manage to juggle all these things as a realtor? Because the buyers don't know what's going on. The sellers usually don't know what's going on. So they're relying on the realtors for the sellers and the buyers. So your job as a buyer then is really to coordinate everything.
Definitely coordinate and negotiate. So once you have a meeting of the minds on the price and the terms, and you get the deposit, you open the escrow. For instance, if there was something glaring on the inspection that the seller didn't know, you might negotiate a different price with the seller. You might ask for the repair. You might ask for the credit. The inspection is just really the first step, because most inspectors are going to say, wait, I want you to have a roof expert come out and check the roof, air conditioning expert come and check the air conditioning, same plumbing, electrical. We want to recommend a licensed plumber and electrician come out to make sure that you have a comfort level that not only is it going to be good when you take it, but also you want to be aware of any future problems that is going to be more maintenance.
Okay, now let's say everything goes well and they put the money in at the very end, they put the cashier's check just before closing. If the buyer or seller defaults, then what kind of problems could there be?
Oh, we don't like that at all. We try to avoid that at all costs. So
Okay.
where it's very common is that the seller wants to pull out because they can sell it for higher. Then we have automatic mediation and arbitration trying to figure it out before we get to the lawsuit. But if it doesn't work out, a lot of times we're in a lawsuit.
All right. And hopefully not too often. But there are chances for the buyer to cancel out based on certain contingencies in the contract, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we only have a couple of minutes left. Allison, you do a lot of charitable work with the Hawaii Home Ownership Center and other charities that you like. But tell us, in a nutshell, what HHOC does.
Oh, okay. Hawaii Home Ownership Center. Their main goal is education for the first-time home buyer, because the last thing any realtor wants to do is have their buyer go into foreclosure after they buy because they didn't understand. So they do a lot of education, and they even have a foreclosure side and they have a land ownership side. So they do wonderful things as far as education to keep the buyer out of foreclosure.
And just to let you know, the classes that Allison teaches for me, she's so generous. She donates her pay from teaching to HHOC as a donation. And she's been doing this for several years now. So I'm really grateful to her. And I sit on the same committee with Allison. And that's the reason I know how generous and charitable she is. Allison, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And I got to tell you, of all the realtors I know in town, Allison is one of the best.
Oh, no, you likewise, right back at you.
She's smart. She knows her stuff. And whenever we had board meetings, man, she studied the board minutes like us guys. Not guys, but I just go in there and go, hey, what are they talking about, Allison? But Allison would have it all underlined and stuff. So I'm really grateful to have her as our guest. Thank you for being here, and hope the show was helpful to you. And if you want to get more information on any of the shows, please go to ThinkTechHawaii.com. And there's a list of all the classes or seminars that we've done. And Allison is one of the wonderful guests that I've been able to have. So for more information on real estate education, please go to www.abeleeseminars.com, and you can see what classes are available if you're interested in perhaps getting a real estate license or want to know more about the real estate buying process. Thank you so much for being here, Allison. It's a pleasure always. And I'm Abe Lee, your host for Finding Your Piece of the Rock on ThinkTech Hawaii. Aloha.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.